Who taught you how to rap, or you already knew how to rap, or how that go?
My big brother Chuck.
Lil RT really just exposed his mother for taking all his money and making him work all day while he gets nothing. Y'all heard about Lil RT, the CIA's greatest plant? If you haven't, don't worry, I'm gonna catch you up. But if you have heard about him, then you already know something never quite sat right about the whole situation. The way he moves, the schedule he keeps, the look in his eyes when he's doing interviews. Real ones caught it early, and today we're not letting it slide no more. Today we're connecting all the dots. No cap, no filter. Let's get into it. All right, to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning. We gotta understand who Lil RT is, where he came from, and how a shorty this young ended up with millions of streams, brand deals, and a following that most grown rappers would sell their soul for. Lil RT came up out of Texas, and if you know anything about Texas rap culture, you know it don't play. Texas built some of the hardest artists to ever touch a mic. And when RT popped up on the scene, people immediately took notice. Why? Because the kid had IT, like you can't fake what he had. The energy, the delivery, the way he commanded the camera at an age when most kids are worried about their homework and what's for lunch. He started going viral on social media. Short clips, freestyles, little moments that just kept getting shared over and over. The algorithm picked him up and didn't let go. And here's where it gets crazy. This wasn't slow burn success. This was overnight type shit. One day, nobody outside his city knew his name. And then seemingly within weeks, millions of people were tagging him, sharing his clips, quoting his lines. The kid went from the block to the timeline faster than most people finish a semester of school. And let me be real with y'all, the kid was good. This wasn't a gimmick. This wasn't, look at this funny little kid rap energy. People genuinely rocked with his music. He had bars, he had presence. At his age, that's genuinely rare, fam. Real recognized real, and the internet recognized RT immediately. Now his mom, she's been front and center from day one. Everywhere RT goes, she's there. Every interview, every event, every video shoot. At first glance, that looks like a supportive parent, a mom who believes in her son. And maybe in the very beginning, that's exactly what it was. A mama seeing her son's gift and pushing him toward greatness. But here's the thing about ambition when it's attached to someone else's talent. At some point, you gotta ask yourself, who is this really for? Is this for the kid, or is this for the parent who finally sees a way out? That question is gonna follow us through this entire video. Keep it in the back of your mind. But that's just the beginning though. Once the views started stacking, the money wasn't far behind. And this is where the story starts shifting, gang. Because when you're dealing with a child artist, a minor, all that money, all those brand deals, all those performance checks, they don't go to the kid, they go through the parent. That's just how the legal structure works. And look, that ain't inherently wrong. Kids need adults to manage their finances. That's normal and necessary. But here's the real tea. There's a massive difference between a parent managing a child's money for the child, protecting it, investing it, saving it for when that kid turns 18 and can make his own decisions, and a parent managing a child's money for themselves.
He saved me.
Okay.
He loved me.
Okay.
He's cared about me.
Treating those earnings like a personal salary, like compensation for the inconvenience of raising a talented kid. RT started getting booked, events, collaborations, features. YouTube money started hitting different, merchandise drops, brand sponsorships. And if you were paying attention to the timeline, the volume of work this kid was putting out didn't slow down when he got successful. It sped up. Every month, something new. Every week, another appearance. Every few days, another piece of content going up. The machine wasn't slowing for nobody, and people started noticing something real early. RT never looked like he was having fun anymore. Watch the early videos. The kid is geeked. He's laughing, he's hyped, he's in his element. You can see it in his whole body. That's a kid who loves what he does, who stumbled into something special and is riding the wave with pure joy. That's authentic. Now go watch some of his more recent content, the live streams, the podcast appearances, the 20 versus 1 challenges. Watch his face when he thinks nobody's paying attention. Watch his body language when there's a moment of stillness between takes. That's a different kid, fam. A tired kid. A kid who's somewhere else in his head even when he's physically in the room. The eyes don't lie, they never do. But wait. It gets worse. Here's where people started connecting the dots. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it, no matter how hard you try. Let me break it down for you. Lil RT, a child, has been consistently booked on 20 versus 1 style challenge content. Now for the uninitiated, these are high production videos where one person faces off against a group in some kind of challenge.
Oh, God. No, I'm free.
Rap battles, physical tests, whatever the format calls for. These videos get massive views. We're talking millions per upload, sometimes tens of millions if the algorithm really picks it up. And they pay. These content houses pay well for appearances because the talent is what drives the numbers. And that sounds fine on the surface, right? Opportunities are opportunities. But here's what really happened. It wasn't one or two appearances. It wasn't a strategic partnership. It became a pattern. RT was being cycled through this content pipeline like he was a product moving down an assembly line. Show up, perform, generate views, generate revenue, repeat. And keep in mind, we're talking about a young shorty, a kid. Not an adult who can advocate for himself in a contract negotiation, who can decide when he's burnt out, who can look at his schedule and say, nah, I need a week off. A kid who, at the end of the day, has to do what his mama says, because that's the law and that's the power structure he's living inside of. On top of the 20-to-1 content, RT was getting booked on podcasts. And some of these podcasts, not exactly environments designed with child comfort in mind. But there he is, sitting across from grown men, being asked to perform and entertain and be on for the duration of whatever the episode calls for, because that appearance fee isn't going to collect itself.
What would you do if I was to line ya?
We gonna beat your ass.
Because the algorithm rewards consistency. Because if RT takes a break, somebody else fills that lane. And then, on top of all of that, he's still supposed to be making music, recording, dropping, staying relevant. Because the moment the content slows down, the algorithm forgets you exist, the brand deals dry up, and the whole ecosystem that's been built around this kid's talent starts to collapse. And think about what that schedule actually looks like for a second, like really sit with it. A normal week in RT's life is not homework and cartoons and pick up basketball with friends. It's bookings and recording sessions and content houses and podcast sets and merchandise coordination. That's not a childhood, that's a career. And the person benefiting most from that career is not the child living it. You know what RT said in one of his more candid moments? He said all he wants to do is play video games and chill like a normal kid. He dropped it casually, almost like a throwaway line, like he didn't fully register how heavy that statement was to anyone actually listening. But the internet caught it. Clips started circulating, and people started asking the real questions out loud. At what point does support become exploitation? And who's responsible for protecting a kid who doesn't even fully understand yet that he needs protecting? Now here's where people started going deeper, and the internet went crazy connecting these threads together. Let's talk numbers for a second, because this is where the conversation gets undeniable. When you map out the revenue streams attached to Lil RT's brand, YouTube ad revenue, Spotify and music streaming, performance appearance fees, merchandise, brand sponsorships, content house deals, we are not talking about small money. We are talking about a financial ecosystem that has, by any reasonable estimate, generated millions of dollars. Real money, generational money if it was being managed right. And where does all of that money sit? Who controls those accounts? Who signs those contracts? Who negotiates those deals? Who receives those checks? Not RT. He's a minor. He legally can't. So let's look at what we can actually observe. Because here's the thing about money. Even when you can't see the bank statements, money leaves evidence. It shows up in lifestyle. It shows up in behavior. It shows up in the choices people make when they suddenly have access to resources they never had before. And what we keep coming back to, what keeps getting flagged by people who've been around the situation, is that RT doesn't appear to be living the life you'd expect for a kid whose brand has generated the kind of revenue we're talking about. He's not talking about what's being built for his future. Meanwhile, the people around him, very comfortable, very active, very motivated to keep the machine running. And I'm not just throwing reckless allegations around. This is about patterns, fam. Observable patterns. The Coogan Law, which was specifically designed to protect child entertainers in California, exists because this story is as old as Hollywood itself. Gary Coleman made Fresh Prince money and died nearly broke because the adults around him ate everything. Macaulay Culkin was one of the biggest child stars on the planet and saw almost none of it. These aren't obscure cases. These are textbook examples of what happens when there are no guardrails, no oversight, no one in the room whose loyalty is to the child and not the child's earning potential. RT is operating in the digital content space, which has even fewer protections than traditional entertainment. Nobody's checking, nobody's auditing, nobody's sitting across from his mom and asking to see the trust fund she's supposedly building for her son. And in that vacuum, the temptation to just spend it is apparently too strong for some people to resist. But here's what really started changing the conversation publicly. RT is young, but he is not slow. Not even a little bit. And kids who've been exposed to the world as fast as he has, who've sat in rooms with industry people and content bosses and podcast hosts with millions of followers, those kids develop a kind of street intelligence that moves faster than their age. They learn to read rooms. They start clocking their own worth. They start understanding, slowly but surely, that the dynamic they're living inside might not be normal. And if you've been watching RT's social media and his public appearances with real attention, not just consuming the content, but actually watching him, you start catching things. Comments that land offhand but hit different when you sit with them. Moments in interviews where somebody asks him what he does for fun and there's this pause, this microsecond where you can almost see the calculation happening in real time, like he's figuring out how much truth he's allowed to tell in this particular room with these particular people recording. He's talked about wanting to just be a kid, not once, multiple times, in multiple different settings. And every single time he says it, the adults around him laugh it off or redirect the conversation. Treat it like an adorable little kid moment, like he's being endearingly relatable. But it is not a cute moment. That is a child communicating something real and painful to anyone willing to slow down long enough to actually hear it. There have been moments, and the clips are out there if you know where to look, where RT is visibly running on empty. You can see it. Mid-interview, mid-appearance, that 1,000-yard stare that shows up when someone's body is present but their spirit checked out 2 cities ago. And nobody around him is calling time out. Nobody's saying, all right, we're done for the day, let the kid breathe. Because there's another booking on the other side of that exhaustion. Another check, another piece of content, another 100,000 views that somebody's counting before they've even been filmed. The 20-to-1 appearances alone, if you map them out on a timeline, represent a pace that would grind down a grown adult with full autonomy and a team of managers looking out for them. For a child with no independent voice in the room, that's not an opportunity. That's a trap dressed up in opportunity's clothing. And here's the part that really got people fired up. When RT started making these comments, these subtle coded communications about not wanting to do certain things, about being tired, about wishing things were different, the response from his management wasn't to pump the brakes. It was to book him harder. Like the solution to a kid saying I'm overwhelmed was to overwhelm him further. That's not a parent managing a career. That's a parent managing a cash cow. And those two things are not the same. When this conversation started gaining real traction online, the response was split right down the middle. And that split tells you everything about where we are as a culture right now. On one side, you had the defenders. She's just making sure her son eats. A lot of parents would love for their kid to have these opportunities. He seems happy in his videos. So what's really the problem? And I hear that, coming from scarcity, coming from neighborhoods where generational poverty feels like the only inheritance available to you. When a door like this opens, you push through it. That survival logic is real, and I respect where it comes from. But here's where I keep it fully 100. There's a version of making sure your kid eats that looks like building a foundation that lasts. Setting aside his earnings in a protected account, teaching him financial literacy, making sure that when he turns 18, he has options, real ones. And then there's a version that looks like running through the money as fast as it comes in because delayed gratification is hard and temptation is everywhere and nobody's legally making you do otherwise. The second group, the people who were heated, many of them parents themselves, people who know what child exploitation looks like because they've lived adjacent to it or experienced it themselves, they weren't buying the supportive mom narrative for a single second. The pattern was too consistent. The evidence was too visible. The kid was telling on the situation every time he opened his mouth, and the adults around him kept changing the subject. Comment sections flooded. People started tagging RT directly with messages of support and concern. Creators started making response content. The conversation got loud enough that it couldn't be contained to just niche corners of the internet anymore. It was mainstream. And once something goes mainstream, the people who were comfortable operating in the shadows start getting very uncomfortable very fast. Other people in the industry started speaking more carefully around the situation because nobody wants to be the one who was in the room and said nothing. Real recognize real, and some real ones started quietly making noise behind the scenes where it matters. All right, let me zoom all the way out now, because as important as RT's specific situation is, this video isn't really just about one kid and one mom. This is about a system, a broken, predatory, largely unregulated system that has been eating child talent alive for as long as entertainment has existed in this country. What's happening to RT is a symptom of a disease that runs through the entire digital content economy. Traditional Hollywood, for all its flaws, at least has some structural protections for child performers. Union oversight, the Coogan Law with actual enforcement behind it. Legal requirements around work hours, education provisions, and earnings preservation. Not perfect, not even close to perfect, but something. The YouTube and social media content space has almost none of that. Any kid can go viral. Any kid can become a revenue engine overnight. And if the parent who is legally positioned to protect those earnings decides instead to treat them as a personal windfall, the platform doesn't care. The brand deal companies don't care. The content houses booking these appearances definitely don't care. They just want the numbers. They just want the views. The welfare of the actual human being generating those views is not their problem and never has been. This is the environment RT grew up inside of, and it is designed, whether intentionally or not, to protect everyone's bag except the kids. RT deserves what every child deserves regardless of how talented they are or how much money their presence generates. He deserves adults in his corner whose loyalty is to him as a person, not to his earning potential as a product. He deserves to know that the money being made in his name is being protected for his future. He deserves Saturdays with nothing on the schedule. He deserves to lose himself in a video game for 6 hours straight without somebody knocking on his door about a podcast appearance in 2 hours. He deserves a childhood, not as a reward for performing well, but because he's a child. That alone is reason enough. The culture needs this conversation, not just about RT, about all of them, about every kid who goes viral before they're old enough to fully understand what that means, about every parent who mistakes their child's gift for their own lottery ticket, about every platform and brand and content house that knowingly books minors into adult-paced grind cycles because nobody's legally stopped them from doing it yet. Look, I want to be straight with y'all before we close this out. I don't have the bank statements. I'm not claiming to know every detail of what goes on behind closed doors in RT's household. There are things I cannot verify, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. That ain't how I move. But I have eyes. Y'all have eyes. And sometimes the most honest, most important thing you can say is simply, something ain't right here. The pattern is too consistent. The signs are too clear. The kid himself keeps telling us in the only language available to him that something is wrong, and it is on US. As the people watching, clicking, sharing, and giving this content its power to decide whether we're going to keep scrolling past it or actually pay attention. So here's what I'm asking from y'all. When you watch RT's content going forward, actually watch him, not just the performance, the person. Is this a kid who's thriving or is this a kid who's surviving? Ask yourself that question every single time. And if you're anybody in the chain of this industry, a booker, a brand deal rep, a content house, a podcast host, and you've had RT on your platform, sit with that. Ask yourself honestly if you did your due diligence. Ask yourself if you looked out for the kid or just the content. RT's talent is real. His future is real. Both of those things deserve to be protected with the same energy that's been put into monetizing them. And the adults in his life, every single one of them, are going to have to answer for what they did or didn't do while the clock was ticking. The streets are watching, the internet is watching, and I hope, for RT's sake, the right people start watching too before there's nothing left to protect. That's the full breakdown, gang. I kept it 100 from the jump. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this if it hit different, and take care of yourselves out there. I'm out. Stay real.